Part 37. Canon Fodder Strategy. Author, Juan ERWR. Chapter 362. Father Tang's voice comforting Yarume came from the kitchen, and a nameless anger surged out of her chest. Lily almost couldn't control herself and wanted to rush into the kitchen. She has changed too much recently, Brother Tang. Do you think someone outside taught her anything? As soon as Yarume finished speaking, Tang's father fell silent. When eating in the morning, Yarume did not come out. Now it is Tang's father who carrying it into the house for her, just like Lily Tang before. When Lily was eating breakfast, Father Tang glanced at his daughter and sighed, "Your aunt Ye has a bad temper after being pregnant recently. You feel wronged, Dad, I know, but it's just for this period of time. As long as you wait for the child in your Aunt Ye's belly to be born, it will be fine." Lily didn't make a sound. Father Tang's lips moved, but in the end he didn't speak again. When he took his briefcase and went out, Yarume, who had been hiding in the house, twisted her body and came out of the house. She leaned against the door and looked at Lily and sneered, "Zai, I'm pregnant now. The child in your belly also hopes to have a complete father's love. You have occupied Brother Tang's favor for more than 10 years, and now it's time to give up to your younger brother, right?" As she spoke, she walked towards Lily, reaching out to take Lily's hand. "You should go back to your mother's house recently. Don't you care about calling me mother? Now you have the opportunity to meet your biological mother. Zai, you should want to go, right? Auntie, can you go collect your clothes?" As soon as Yarume finished speaking, she dragged Lily and was about to walk into the house. One of her hands was soft and cold, and she held her hand feeling as if she was entangled by a snake. Lily subconsciously stretched out her hand to shake her away. Yarume, who had been standing very steadily just now, suddenly seemed to be thrown away involuntarily by Lily's strength. "Go out!" she screamed. The slightly protruding belly suddenly hit the long table leg in the restaurant. Hearing a soft bang sound, Yarume squatted on the ground with a face of pain, hugged her stomach and began to cry out in pain. A similar scene in the plot made Lily suddenly grin. In the original plot, Tang Lily also had a dispute with Yarume, and finally pushed her down and caused a miscarriage, but now she was clearly trying her best to while avoiding Yarume. The same scene still happened, making Tang Lily feel guilty for a lifetime. The thing that made her feel uneasy every time she thought about it, no matter how she looked at it now, it looked like a farce written and directed by Yarume. Yarume actually doesn't want her own child. Lily subconsciously took 2 steps back, and the door was suddenly opened. Father Tang, who had just left the house not long ago, came in with his briefcase. He saw the scene in the room and was stunned subconsciously. "Brother Tang, save me, don't blame the child." Yarume was now sweating heavily on her forehead, her face was as pale as paper, and her lips were almost bitten. She just shouted to Father Tang to save her. He repeatedly told Father Tang not to blame Lily, but Father Tang just looked at Lily with a complicated expression. Throwing the things in his hands to the ground, he strode in and picked up Yarume, while taking his mobile phone to call the emergency number. Lily was the only one left in the room, and her eyes suddenly turned cold when she saw Tang's father hugging Yarume out in a panic. She originally thought that this mission would have some difficulty in finding out who Yarume was killed by. Unexpectedly, Yarume was willing to use her own flesh and blood to frame her, and did not hesitate to use such a tragic method. Although Yarume had seen it before, she didn't like her, and he tried to arouse her anger everywhere, but all he did was use some unscrupulous little tricks. This time he targeted her, as if he had seen her with a strange man since the last time he went to evening self-study. At the beginning of the meeting, Lily originally didn't want to interfere with Yarume's business, but now that the matter fell on her, even if she didn't want to interfere anymore, she still had to get to the bottom of it. When Yarume was sent to the hospital that day, the male fetus that had already formed in her belly could not be saved. When Father Tang called back, there was obvious disappointment and exhaustion in his tone. After he told Lily to take good care of herself, he no longer waited as usual. Lily hung up the phone first, but turned around and hung up the phone first. Tang's father did not come to pick her up in the evening. When Lily finished her evening self-study, she just got off the bus and walked towards the community. I don't know if the street lights in the area in front of her were broken tonight. The surrounding area looked a bit gloomy, but this road Lily entered after the mission, she had walked dozens of times. Even with her eyes closed, she could tell what flowers and plants were around her. When she walked towards the gate of the community with her school bag on her back, she saw under a plane tree that had almost lost all its leaves. But an arm stretched out and pulled her over. The strength seemed a bit urgent, and he pulled her heavily into the man's arms. The smell of tobacco mixed with the light smell of soap came. The man was wearing clothes with a slightly harder fabric and a very strong chest. Lily's face was numb from the impact. The man's arms were around her waist, giving her a heavy feeling. Feeling oppressive, since Lily had suffered a loss in the last mission, she subconsciously stretched out her hand to push the person away. The person sneered twice, and his palms were like iron claws, clasping tightly around her waist. "Yarume, do you know her?" His voice was a little hoarse, and he didn't know whether it was because of the cold weather or other reasons, but his tone was trembling. Lily originally wanted to struggle, but when she heard him mention Yarume, she paused. The man hesitated for a while, then let her go, and then turned around as if he was afraid that she would escape. He moved his body so that Lily's back was pressed against the big tree he was leaning against. Then he put one hand on the side of her face and took out a lighter with the other hand. He pressed it twice, but then he seemed to remember something. Extinguished the fire. Even if it only took a moment, Lily could see his face clearly. The bright firelight seemed to set off his flawless face and illuminate Lily's eyes. This man was extremely tall, almost taller than her. He has half a head of hair, slightly curly hair, and a pair of peach blossom-like eyes under his thick eyebrows, but there is an air of coldness for no reason, which makes people intimidated at first sight. His facial features are like knives and axes, even though he just looked at them. At one glance, that appearance seemed to be imprinted in Lily's mind, and she couldn't get rid of it for a while. Judging from his age, this young man should not be very old. Although his eyes seem to contain too many things that people cannot understand, his face is immature. Although his expression is mature, Lily has done so many tasks, and he is not good at looking at people. He has his own set of skills. The man in front of him is only in his early 20s at most. When we had close contact with him just now, there were not many men with broad shoulders and thin waists. Lily dared to conclude that he was the man she saw last time with Yarume across the street. She was talking to the man beside the car, but she never saw his face clearly. "Yarume? You were chatting with her across the street last time, right?" Lily pretended to be innocent and a little scared, but the man with his arms propped up by her cheeks suddenly couldn't help but whisper softly. He laughed, and he got closer and closer. When his forehead was almost touching Lily's head, a pair of eyes shone in the darkness. Lily frowned, but the man seemed to know that she would not like it, and he was getting closer. She paused again. "It's me." "Who are you?" Unexpectedly, he admitted it so readily. Lily asked tentatively. The young man did not straighten up, but hesitated. In the end, it seemed that he could not control it, and his lips were a little cold. He lightly touched Lily's forehead. "Yejinzi, I work in a hotel not far across the street." "Nice to meet you." After he finished speaking, he turned around and left, without mentioning Yarume whom he had just asked about. He even told Lily his name, but he didn't seem to mean to ask Lily's name. Lily breathed a sigh of relief, although she didn't like the presence of anyone. She touched her forehead and left a breath, but she still looked at Yejinzi's leaving figure and said nothing. For several days in a row, Lily was worried about whether she would meet the man named Yejinzi again, but after he left his name and left that night, he never appeared again. Instead, he lost a child in the hospital. Yerume returned home from the hospital half a month later. Yerume's loss of her child this time suddenly caused the originally relaxed relationship between Lily and Tang's father to become tense again. Tang's father looked at Lily again with a more evasive look. This scene is similar to what Tang's father later said to his daughter in the plot. The scene after the estrangement was very similar. Lily had tried to talk to Tang's father, but Tang's father either avoided her or rarely talked to her sometimes, but Yerume always appeared unexpectedly. "Brother Tang, these days I always think about the child I lost." Yerume sighed and shed tears again during dinner. Whenever Lily sat down to eat with Tang's father, Yerume would always mention the child she had just lost. Lost child. When Father Tang heard this today, he put the chopsticks in his hand on the dining table. He glanced at Lily and gritted his teeth. "Ziahe, your aunt Ye has been lonely and helpless all her life. Now she is married to me, but she still doesn't have a serious reputation with the outside world. I plan to hold a meeting with her in 2 days when your aunt Ye gets better. A wedding, and besides." In the plot, Tang's father felt guilty. In addition to organizing a luxurious wedding for Yerume, he also transferred all the working capital in his name to Yerume's name. In this way, as compensation for the loss of her child, although Tang Bei didn't like Yerume at first, she acquiesced to the fact that the loss of Yerume's child was related to her. But now Lily recalled that asset. Tang's father had saved a lot of money from doing business for many years. However, after Yerume was killed, the money disappeared and its whereabouts are unknown. To be continued. Cannon Fodder Strategy. Author, Juan ERWR. Chapter 363. "And yeah, a man named Yejinzi came to see you 2 days ago, but I don't know where you went." Lily was completely suspicious at this moment, and interrupted Tang's father, who was about to say that he should give the money to Yerume. If so, Tang's father originally thought that he would give the money to Yerume as compensation, and it was not that he couldn't earn it back in the rest of his life, but he didn't expect that Yerume would die so quickly. Because of this, after he was imprisoned, in addition to giving money to Tang Lily apart from this villa, which was just a down payment, there was nothing else. When she heard the name Yejinzi, Yerume's face suddenly changed. She started to smile and glanced at Lily with a proud look, but now her face turned pale and the corners of her mouth twitched. After twitching, he snorted coldly and didn't mention the child again. Instead, he had an ugly expression. "Yejinzi, I don't know him. Did he find the wrong person?" Tang's father also nodded. What he was about to say was interrupted by Lily. At this moment, he thought that sooner or later he would have the opportunity to explain it to Lily, so he was not in a hurry. If Yerume hadn't recently lost her son, he was so pained and sad that he would not mention it to his daughter at this time. Seeing that both of them had changed the topic, Tang's father also said, "I have known your aunt Ye for 10 years, and I know everything about her. It's very strange that she doesn't know anyone from Yejinzi, so maybe she got the wrong one. How could it be a mistake? Last time, my father told me to wait for Aunt Ye to pick me up at school, but I waited for Aunt Ye for half an hour and she still hadn't come. When I came back, I saw her and Yejinzi leaning against the car." As soon as Lily said these words, Yerume's eyes suddenly turned cold, even though she was over 30. "But the appearance is beautiful. Plus well maintained." So at this moment, he still looked like he was 27 or 27, but once his face dropped, a fierce look suddenly appeared on his face. "It's dark or you are blind. You must have seen it wrong." Yerume used to smile and smile when facing Tang's father, and she was good at coaxing, so she was very popular with Tang's father. Even though she was already married and had a daughter, Yerume could not resist Yerume's tenderness in the end. This was the first time that Father Tang saw Yarume turning her face like a book. The first time he saw her fierce and mean look, he was stunned for a moment, and subconsciously said, "The child is still young, so if you have anything to say, please speak it carefully, that is. She is young. She knew how to knock the child out of my belly at such a young age. She is still using men to slander me at such a young age." Yarume stood up as if going crazy, wiped her tears and started crying. "Today at home, there is her without me, there is me without her. It's just that Yejinzi's surname is Ye, and Aunt Ye's surname is also Ye. I just wanted to ask if you two are related. Why did Aunt Ye wrong me like this?" Tang Lily in the plot has always been provoked by Yarume into a rage. At this moment, Lily's few words made Yarume's complexion change drastically. Yejinzi, whom she thought she met casually, would have such a big influence on Yarume at this moment. Who would believe it if they said that these two people are not related? "Get out of here." Yarume stood up immediately with a look of great irritation. In the past, she always pretended to be gentle and considerate in front of Father Tang, even when she was framing Lily. Data didn't care about her, and it was the first time he told Lily to get out of here so fiercely. Yejinzi was a clue. Although I don't know the reason for Yarume's subsequent death, I can find one more clue now. Of course it was a good thing. Lily breathed a sigh of relief and put down the bowls and chopsticks with a sullen face. "Why do you tell me to get out? This house belongs to me. When my father and my mother divorced, I agreed that this house would be in my name. It's you who should get out." When Yarume heard this, she reached out to lift the dishes on the table as if going crazy. Father Tang hurriedly stretched out his arms to hug her, and managed to calm her down. Since then, the two of them have completely broken up on the surface. No one is pretending to be like before. The family that had been getting better for a few months suddenly seemed to have returned to the situation when Lily Tang was still there. Tang's father felt deeply depressed at home. On one side was his wife, who was nagging and became painful after the miscarriage, and on the other side was his biological daughter. He was very embarrassed to be caught in the middle, so he began to go out early and come back late like in the plot. The first weekend of December happened to be Tang Beihi's birthday. Early in the morning, a classmate invited her to go shopping. After thinking about it and having nothing to do at home, Beihi agreed. Unexpectedly, when she came back after leaving, I saw police cars surrounding my community, sirens blaring, and ambulances parked outside the community at the same time. This scene seemed vaguely familiar. Lily was frowning, and there was a man covered in blood in the community. After being carried out and pushed towards the ambulance, Tang's father, who looked panicked, was standing beside the ambulance. When the person on the stretcher was carried over, Lily saw that the pale face without a trace of blood turned out to be Yarume's. Yarume, who was supposed to die 3 years later, was actually murdered at this time. When Lily was a little shocked, a policeman at the other end was pulling Tang's father to record a statement. When Lily was about to step forward, she was suddenly shot from behind. After a tug, he fell into a strong chest while standing unsteadily. She was quickly turned around and her head was pressed on the man's chest. Yejinzi's light voice buried his head in her ear and said, "SHH." Lily's face was covered in someone's chest, almost unable to breathe fresh air. Yejinzi's hands were strong and he held her in his arms affectionately. He seemed to be wearing a very large windbreaker. Wrapped Lily in the windbreaker, from a distance, it looked like a scared girl throwing herself into her boyfriend's chest, which did not arouse any surprise from the onlookers around her. People around were talking a lot, talking about what happened 2 hours ago. None of them could explain clearly, but there was a lot of chatter around. Naturally, Lily's struggle was not as exciting as Yarume, who was hacked to death in front of her. There was no one at all. He noticed that a girl was put into an off-road vehicle, and the car drove away easily. Yejinzi, Lily came to her senses when she got into the car. She was trapped in the back seat. The windows and doors around the car were locked. She twisted it several times but couldn't open it. Patting the car door again, Yejinzi, who was driving, held the steering wheel and drove in the opposite direction to the community where the Tang family was located. When Lily saw the navigation installed in his car, he obviously wanted to leave the city. "Where are you taking me?" Lily stood up, but Yejinzi seemed to deliberately brake. After a sudden stop, Lily became unsteady and bumped into the back of the seat in front, then fell into the car seat behind. "I want to take you out of the city. I solved a problem like Yerume's for you. You should stay with me for the rest of your life. Are you grateful to me?" Yejinzi, who had been silent since he just got in the car, replied. Turning his head, half of his flawless face looked a bit cold and biting under the not-so-warm winter sun. "Lily, are you right?" Lily didn't expect that the truth she wanted to pursue for the original owner would be answered so easily. She opened her mouth for a moment, and she couldn't believe the fact. You said Yerume is you." "Yes, I killed her." Yejinzi stretched out his hand towards Lily in the back seat across the seats. He was still driving the car with one hand and looked forward. Lily was sitting in such a wide space in the back seat. He couldn't avoid his hand, and his cheek was touched by him. There seemed to be a lingering smell of blood in his palms, even though his palms had been washed clean, but Minato, when she reached Lily's cheek, she still smelled the iron rust gas that was so sweet that it couldn't be melted away. Lily's lips moved and she forgot to dodge for a moment. Yejinzi's hand touched her cheek lightly before lowering his head. Laughing, he took his hand back. "Why did you kill her?" Although she could smell the smell on Yejinzi's body after killing someone, Lily still couldn't believe it. She saw Yerume talking to Yejinzi that day. In this scene, Yerume was so protective of Yejinzi that she even fell out in front of Father Tang when Lily mentioned his name. She was even more willing to destroy the image of a good wife and mother she had always maintained because of this. Yerume had done so much for him. Yejinzi actually attacked her. Lily was a little confused. "I don't like her and want to kill her." Yejinzi heard Lily's question and quickly turned the steering wheel. The car accelerated again and rushed directly onto the overpass out of the city. After he said this, he paused again. "Well, I have actually wanted to kill her for a long time. Now I will help you get rid of someone you don't like. Aren't you happy?" Yejinzi, who said that killing a person is like killing an ant, showed confusion on his face. He seemed not to understand why Lily was so curious about this question. After he said this, Lily didn't speak after that, and he laughed twice more. "My parents have always liked me since I was a child, but after my brother, who was 3 years younger than me, was born, my parents gradually began to dislike me because I was not their biological son. After they had their own biological son, naturally, they felt that I was worthless and signed me up as a cowherd in a hotel at a high price 2 years ago." When he said this, Lily saw in the rearview mirror of the car that there was even a relaxed and happy smile on the corner of his mouth, as if he was not embarrassed or humiliated by his situation at all. His eyes were calm and cold, and the corners of his mouth were slightly raised. He was obviously in a very good mood at the moment. "Yerume came to this hotel 2 years ago and started to look for me frequently. Just let me chat with her." When Yejinzi said this, the corners of his mouth twitched involuntarily, and a sinister look flashed in his eyes. "It wasn't until some time ago that she told me that she was my biological mother. She took me away because she couldn't support me. She gave it away, and now she wants to make it up to me, so I thought about it and killed her." To be continued. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Cannon Fodder Strategy. Author, Juan ERWR. Chapter 364. When listening to the first half of the story, Lily still sighed for Yejinzi's life experience, but when she heard the next 2 sentences, no matter how calm Ren Lily was, the corners of her mouth could not help but twitch, and she began to doubt. Did Yejinzi deliberately tell nonsense to deceive himself? How could anyone hear that his biological mother appeared and wanted to make up for him and then feel dissatisfied and wanted to kill someone? Don't believe it? This is a bit nerve-wracking. Once on the overpass and onto the highway, Yejinzi was no longer as anxious as before. He slowed down the car and even looked back from time to time. Looking at Lily, his eyes that were originally full of gloom seemed to be filled with smiles. Although he was saying troublesome words, he didn't look troubled at all at this time. Go on, where do you want to go when you get down? He looked like he really wanted to travel with him. Lily thought for a moment, I want to go home. Sorry. His foot was still on the accelerator, but his hands left the steering wheel and made a helpless gesture. The Tang family will no longer be your home. The car became quiet. The Tang family was indeed not her home. As long as Tang's father was cleared of the suspicion of murder, and now the identity of the real murderer of Yerume was revealed, Tang Lily's two wishes had been fulfilled. Where would she live? In fact, they are all the same, but her intuition tells Lily that Yejinzi is very dangerous, and his strong personality puts pressure on Lily. Therefore, she does not want to go with Yejinzi, and is ready to wait for Yejinzi to stop the car. After that, try to find an opportunity to leave. Seeing that Lily was silent, Yejinzi turned on the radio in the car, which happened to be showing the news of Yerume's murder. Police speculated it was a home invasion. After all, today is Tang Lily's birthday. Lily had an appointment with her classmates early in the morning, and Yerume was still alive when she left. The security guard confirmed this, which indirectly cleared Lily's suspicion. Naturally, the police did not first suspect Tang Lily because of her relationship with him like in the plot. Yerume killed someone in anger because of the relationship between her and Yerume. Naturally, there was no such thing as Tang's father being desperate for life and then taking the blame for his daughter. The police speculate that the gangsters rebelled because of their wealth. Since the victim was not assaulted, the case does not rule out the suspicion that the murderer is a woman. Our reporters will continue to pay attention to this case. If you have any clues, please call the police and the public service hotline. After the sweet-sounding female anchor told the story of the case, reported a series of phone numbers and the contact address of the police station that was investigating the case, the topic then turned to other news. Lily sat quietly in the back seat and listened to the news without saying a word. Yejinzi reached out and turned off the radio, and the silence in the car returned to the previous state. After the car left the road, it drove onto a very remote road. After walking for several hours, it stopped at a small farmhouse with no one in front or behind. It had already darkened by now, and this small courtyard was probably not usually occupied by people. Yejinzi got out of the car first, took the key and opened the courtyard door, then got back in and drove in. After locking the courtyard door, he opened the car door and waved to Lily with a smile, "Come out. Do you like it here?" The night wind was still mixed with coldness, snowflakes were floating in the sky, and there was snow all around. Lily shivered when she got out of the car, and Yejinzi thoughtfully took off his clothes and put them on her. Seeing that she didn't say anything about what he just asked, she curved her lips and asked, "Do you like it?" Although there was a smile on his face, his eyes were obviously sinister, and the corners of his raised lips were filled with laughter. A bit stubborn, like a boy eager for approval. This small farmhouse is indeed beautiful. Although the heavy snow has covered many of the scenery, the blue bricks and plain tiles still reveal a somewhat primitive look. After Yejinzi pulled her to open the door, what was completely different from the ordinary farmhouse outside was the luxurious decoration inside. The floor was covered with thick wool carpets, and there was even a small courtyard in the living room. Yejinzi asked Lily to sit on the sofa for a while. He turned around and went out. After a while, he came in with a bundle of firewood. As the smoke gradually burned, the room slowly became warmer. After riding in the car for a day, Lily was still a little wary of Yejinzi, but in such an environment, she unconsciously fell asleep with her eyes closed. When she woke up, she was greeted by the smell of food. When she woke up with a start, a shadow hit her. When she opened her eyes and subconsciously shrank her body towards the sofa, she saw Yejinzi holding a bowl of porridge in his hand. He didn't know how long he had been squatting next to her and watching her. Because of the light behind her, Lily couldn't see the emotions in his eyes when she opened her eyes. She could only see the facial features under the large shadow, as if they were slowly carved out with a good sculpture knife, very delicate. "Are you hungry? The room is already very warm, and the firewood in the fireplace occasionally explodes with small sparks." Yejin wears a brown v-neck sweater on his upper body, with the collar opened below the chest line, revealing his delicate collarbone. His chest was clearly defined, and his breath was filled with the beauty of strength. His originally light-colored jeans were now covered in dust, and his hair looked a bit messy and decadent. It was obvious that when Lily just fell asleep, he should be did a lot of things. Such a murderer dared to point a knife at Yerume, so naturally he didn't care about killing one more person. Although Lily felt that Yejinzi was very dangerous, she did not feel any malice towards her from him. Besides, if he really wanted to harm her, there was no need to. After making such a big circle, she hesitated for a moment and reached out to take the porridge in Yejinzi's hand. A bit of regret flashed in Yejinzi's eyes. He sighed silently and stood up, his tall body casting a very long shadow. He sat next to Lily, relaxed his body and leaned on the back of the sofa, with a satisfied smile on his face. Lily didn't know why, but she felt inexplicably angry when she saw him like this. "I just killed Yerume, are you so happy?" Seeing her unhappy look, Yejinzi couldn't help but laugh. "This farmhouse is not big. Although it is small, it is well equipped. Except for the bathroom, living room, and kitchen, there is only one room left." Yejinzi took the quilt and spread it on the ground early. Lily originally she thought he would let her sleep on it, but to Lily's surprise, he lay down on it himself. Lily was a little wary at first, but 2 days later she discovered that Yejinzi was not as detrimental to her as she thought. Although the way he often looked at Lily made her shiver, it was beyond Lily's expectation. Yes, he had always been very well behaved, but this calm was like the calm before the storm. On the 3rd day, a passing car came and wanted to stay for a night, breaking the delicate balance between the two of them. "In this damn weather, can our friends inside open the door and let us and my wife stay for one night? We will pay for it." Parked outside the yard was a car with a somewhat dirty appearance. The woman, whose face was almost covered in a cloth, rolled down the car window and shouted into the house. Yejinzi was sweeping the snow in the yard, and pretended to turn a deaf ear to the shouting. The woman was obviously cold and hungry, and her face was turning blue now. The air she breathed out seemed to condense into ice crystals for an instant, turning into snowflakes and flying down from the air. "Please, we have been driving for several hours, and we have not met other people on the road. We will give you money, or let us rest for a while, please." Lily poked her head out to take a look, but Yejinzi didn't say anything. The people driving outside stopped driving, and a man wearing a thick cotton-padded jacket also jumped out of the car. The two couples supported each other and entered the yard. The woman saw the moment Lily looked at her, her eyes suddenly widened. Her strange look was noticed by Yejinzi. The corners of her mouth could not help but curl up slightly, and a fierce light flashed in her eyes. "Just sit down for a while and let us warm our feet. Please give us some food and we will repay you." The man couldn't stop shivering. Lily originally thought that Yejinzi would not agree, but unexpectedly, to the surprise of both of them, he nodded without hesitation. There was a fireplace burning in the room, and it was as warm as spring. The two couples let out a long sigh of relief when they came in. They took off their cotton-padded clothes that were already stiff from the cold outside. Once they sat down, they kept rubbing their hands. Glancing at Lily, her eyes became brighter. "Little girl, "Is your surname Tang?" The woman opened her mouth and asked. The man sitting next to her gave her a hard bump. Her eyes flashed, and she lowered her head involuntarily, holding her hands. They were twisted together tightly, and it was obvious that their hearts were not as calm as they appeared on the surface. Yejinzi didn't bring out the food. The man glanced at his free hand, rolled his eyes, and showed obvious disappointment on his face. "Brother, is there anything to eat?" he asked, seeing Yejinzi ignored him and couldn't help bumping into the woman next to him. The woman stared at Lily subconsciously. Yejinzi smiled softly. "The food has been cooked, just some simple light dishes. I just hope don't be offended by the guests." When the man heard this, he curled up his lips. After hearing that there was something to eat, he began to sing along with the woman to find out Yejinzi's identity. "Brother, I don't know what your name is. Where did you come from? Where did it come from? What's the connection? Have you heard about the recent major events in the capital? We are coming from the last town, and we don't know about the recent major events in the capital." Asking someone in a remote mountain village about what happened in the capital, there were no computers or even TVs anywhere in the room. There was not even a phone line around. The sarcasm in Yejinzi's eyes became even stronger, and Lily could also see it. The two couples seemed to have bad intentions, but she didn't say anything. After Yejinzi brought out the food for the two people to finish, he invited Lily to go back to the room to sleep for a while, and he chatted with the guests for a while. To be continued. Cannon Fodder Strategy. Author, Juan ERWR. Chapter 365. The two couples looked like they were having a serious conversation, as if they wanted to find out Yejinzi's origins, so they were very happy with the proposal. Lily returned to the room, feeling that something was going to happen this afternoon. The surroundings were quiet, as if she could hear the sound of her own heartbeat. An hour later, Yejinzi hadn't come back yet. Lily couldn't sit still and was about to go find him, but he came back covered in blood. "How did you end up like this?" Lily was shocked when she saw him like this. He wiped his face nonchalantly. "I'll change clothes and go out." After he said this, his expression was a little cold. "The two people outside wanted to call the police and make money from us, so I killed them," he said the murderous thing with an understatement, as if he had just killed like two fishes. Lily was shocked. When he killed Yerume, he could tell that this person was not a good land believer. Yejinzi had a very dangerous trait, but because these days he had done something terrible again, so Lily didn't expect that he would kill someone again. Just as he was a little dazed, Yejinzi changed his clothes and went out, obviously preparing to bury the body. "From now on, the two of us are tied together. If you leave at this time, you will only be regarded as my accomplice." His tone was very calm, and Lily's heart sank, but she saw him leaving the room directly and taking the shovel, obviously preparing to dig a hole to bury the body. Lily's face was cold. What Yejinzi just said can be called a warning or advice to her. It is an indisputable fact that he killed someone at this moment. If the matter is exposed, she will live with him for 2 days. Time. He might be considered an accomplice. If she wants to leave alone. Not to mention whether she currently has the ability or whether she knows the way out of this remote place. Even if she can leave, it will not be difficult for Yejinzi to drag her into the water. Although Tang Bei is not yet 18 years old and can take responsibility, she cannot end up like the original owner. Once she is accused of murder, if Tang's father also has to run for her like in the plot, this mission is equivalent to a failure. Now that the real murderer of Yerume has been found, although Father Tang has lost her daughter, he will not have to die in prison in the future. It is equivalent to the wish of the two original owners being fulfilled, although it is not. I know why Yejinzi insists on tying her to his side, but now that the task has been completed, the remaining time is already extra, just to accompany him to escape, no matter what unexpected outcome one day. There was no loss for her. Thinking of this, Lily felt cruel. He also put on his clothes and followed him out. Yejin was indeed digging a hole at the moment. The snow and soil were piled aside. In a short time, he had dug a shallow hole about 2 meters long. There were dense beads of sweat on his forehead in the cold weather. When he felt Lily's arrival, he did not look back. Have you figured it out? It's not pleasant to have someone guess your thoughts. Although Lily has already figured it out in her heart, she refuses to admit it. You did it yourself, why do you insist on dragging me along? Yejin, who had his back to Lily, stiffened when he heard this. He had a wry smile on his face and a bit of sadness in his eyes. Lily, who had his back to him, couldn't see the look on his face at the moment. He gritted his teeth, his cheek muscles twitched, his eyelids drooped, snowflakes fell on his eyelashes, melted by his body temperature, turned into ice water, and poured into his eyes. Take it. Yejin suddenly took off the jacket he had just put on and threw it towards Lily. The movements of his hands were faster, and the muscles on his arms stretched out smooth lines while digging the soil. Come, he finished digging the pit and threw the shovel aside. No reason, maybe I'm just too lonely and want to find someone to accompany me. He dragged the body's feet and threw it into the pit, saying harshly, he said, kill Yarume and when you leave with me, we will have no way out. Lily sighed, saw his stiff back, threw his clothes aside, and lifted the body for him. After so many missions, I have killed a lot of people, but this is the first time I have buried a corpse with my own hands. I wonder if it was because the corpse had been frozen in the cold weather. It was so heavy that Yejin was stunned for a moment, and suddenly he grinned suddenly, and the ice that had condensed in his eyes seemed to melt instantly with this smile, and there were still fine beads of sweat on his forehead. At this moment, his smile was indescribably relaxed and happy. From the moment she carried his body, Lily knew she couldn't go back. Since it is impossible to live the simple life that Tang Lily used to live, she naturally hopes that she can live a more comfortable life. 2 people died here, and there is also a dilapidated car that is not easy to deal with. Naturally, this small yard is no longer inhabitable. Yejin spent 2 days carefully cleaning the house, cleaning every place where he might leave traces, and painting the entire house with a large amount of bleach to ensure that no traces were left. After leaving traces of the mission, he left with his few belongings. He had a lot of money on him, and the 2 of them didn't stay in the same place for a long time. Yejin usually chose to rest in hotels that did not require ID cards and were relatively ordinary. They were almost always hidden in the busy city. There may be dozens of foreigners staying there, and if anyone notices something weird about the 2 of them, he will kill them without hesitation. Winter has turned to spring very quickly before we left the northern border. Newspapers no longer reported the news of Yarume's death. However, the police station offered a reward of 100,000 yuan. This figure is of great significance to many people. It was like a windfall for people, so it was no wonder that the couple looked happy when they saw Lily. After that, Lily would put on some simple clothes when she went out, until gradually no one mentioned Yarume anymore. She, the missing daughter of the Tang family that day, was also slowly forgotten, until Father Tang thought she was dead. After cancelling all her information, Lily gradually began to stop pretending. Yejin drove all day and night. The 2 of them had just entered a bustling big city and found a hotel to stay in. At this moment, after Lily took a hot bath and changed clothes, she turned on the TV in the room and had just switched it twice. Lily saw a familiar scene. Teams of police officers were appearing in the small farmyard where she and Yejin lived. After the snow melted, the car the 2 couples drove was revealed. At this time, it was already rusty, and teams of police dogs were sniffing around. However, Yejin sprinkled bleach around the farmyard, making it more difficult for the police dogs to find the body. A group of police was digging around with a shovel, and found almost nothing in the house. It was as clean and tidy as a model house. Does it look good? When Yejin came out of the shower, he saw Lily lying on the bed and looking at it with gusto. There was no worry on her face at all. After leaving the Tang family for a few months, her face had changed. The remaining traces of childishness turned into a cold and steady look, which was different from the Tang Bai when he first saw her, but it was still something he could never tire of. Lily smiled, and Yejinzi lowered his head and kissed her gently on the forehead. A few drops of water on his hair fell to her cheek, making her frown. Yejinzi seemed not to be worried at all. Not worried that the body would be dug up by the police, he just glanced at the TV casually, and finally his eyes fell on Lily, and his eyes gradually became gentle. There are no parents or relatives between the two, no close friends or anyone else with whom they can communicate. It seems that in a bustling city, the two have become partners who hug each other and protect each other's secrets. The same experience binds the two tightly. The mysterious couple's death case once again became an unsolved case. The police carefully investigated and found that the two people had no grudges. The yard originally belonged to an overseas Chinese, and the empty house had been there for nearly 7 years. Although the overseas Chinese had friends in China, they had no contact with the couple, and there was no evidence of alibi. The clues suddenly seemed to be cut off. The police offered a reward of 500,000 yuan, but there was no evidence at all. People can provide valid clues. Every time they stayed in one place for a few days, the two of them went to another place. In just 5 years, Yejinzi took Lily to almost the entire country. He was not a person with a good personality, and his eyes were there is always a sense of gloominess in his heart, and his expression sometimes makes people shudder, and there is a sense of danger between his eyebrows. He has a bad temper, and he always chooses remote and uninhabited corners when driving. For almost a few years, the two of them were alone for most of the time. Apart from talking to Lily, he didn't like chatting with others, just like a lonely wolf. In the dead of night, Yejinzi parked the car in front of a cornfield with no village in front or back, and rested his head on Lily. Lily had grown taller in the past few years, and Yejinzi didn't care about him, but he took good care of her, sometimes so meticulously that Lily felt like he was holding her in the palm of his hand. There were crisp sounds of insects in the quiet night sky, and the scenery on a summer night had a unique flavor. Then she stretched out her hand to open the skylight above her head, and the stars in the sky came into view. Lily thought of the mysterious starry sky, and felt a little dazed looking at the night stars. There was a sound of soft footsteps not far away, and after a long while, a somewhat obscene male voice said with a smile, "Brother, there is a pair of wild mandarin ducks having an affair here." Yejinzi's originally gentle face suddenly darkened, and he became very irritable after being disturbed, because Lily felt that all the muscles in his body had stiffened. To be continued. Cannon Fodder Strategy. Author, Wan Erwr. Chapter 366. Boy, get out of the car, you are so brave, you dare to have sex in the wild. A thin figure emerged from the corn bushes, still wearing his belt. His eyes first glanced at Lily, and then it fell on Yejinzi. He looks pretty good, but it's a pity that he's a man. I can't handle this. As soon as he finished speaking, a strong man with tattoos on both arms came out from behind. There is a road to heaven, it's really troublesome, Yejinzi sneered, quickly closed the roof of the car, took something in his hand, unfastened his seat belt and got out of the car. Lily closed her eyes. Yejinzi didn't like it when someone disturbed him when he was in a good mood, otherwise he would become extremely violent and bloodthirsty. She knew what would happen next without even looking. It didn't take long for her to suddenly see something from behind the car. There was a muffled sound, and the little man who had just spoken suddenly screamed, as if he wanted to escape, but in the end he couldn't escape. There was a sound of heavy objects falling to the ground. This time Yejinzi came back. It was so fast that he didn't even seem to be interested in disposing of the body. He just did some cleaning up and got back in the car. Leave first. There was still blood on his hands, but he took out a tissue and wiped it clean without hesitation. After killing the person, Yejin didn't feel the tension or panic of killing anyone at all. He didn't there was no emotion at all, and he was as calm as if he had just crushed an ant to death. Even though it was not the first time that he had seen him like this, Lily still couldn't help but feel chills running down her back when she saw this scene. She herself is not a believer in men and women, and she has killed some people in the plot, but she can't be as calm as Yejin when killing people. Lily suddenly thought of what Yejin said for the first time when he killed Yarume. Maybe the first killing went too smoothly. So after he killed someone, he didn't have any mental baggage in his heart. The two of them were on the run in the past few years. It didn't matter if Yejin was in a good mood, but if he was in a bad mood, the people who met him would be in bad luck. However, he had rigorous methods and high anti-reconnaissance capabilities. He killed so many people, but the police had no clue at all over the years. But after living this wandering life for a long time, Lily also felt a little tired of it. There was a smell of blood in the car. Yejin, who had just killed someone and looked calm, became a little anxious subconsciously when he saw Lily didn't speak. He turned his head and looked at Lily several times with a look in his eyes. With a bit of a flattering look, "What's wrong? Those two scum just disturbed your interest." His handsome face showed a bit of eagerness, and there were a few drops of blood that had not dried up on his plump forehead. Lily rushed, he waved, and he obediently leaned over, his attitude as docile as a cat. There was no trace of the hostility just now. It stained with blood. Lily took a tissue to wipe it off for him, and he grinned. Showing his white teeth, his expression was somewhat satisfied. "Thank you." Yejin sighed. Just because of Lily's small movement, the corners of his mouth could no longer fall down. He seemed to be in a very good mood. Lily held the piece of paper in his palm and couldn't help but turn his head. "Ask him, why do you want to kill them?" Although the two people looked wretched, they were just irrelevant passers-by. There was no need to kill them. After killing people, they had to clean up the aftermath. No matter how cautious Yejin was, if he was discovered one day, the world is so big, I am afraid that in such a world, it would be extremely difficult for the two of them to hide. "They disturbed our time alone," Yejin responded naturally. Seeing Lily's indifferent expression, he sighed and leaned his head over. "I know you don't like it, so I won't kill these people anymore. It's not interesting anyway. Let's find a place with beautiful mountains and clear waters to live, okay?" After drifting for so many years, although Yejin enjoyed it, he could see that although Lily didn't say anything, she must be tired in her heart. In fact, what he wanted was just to stay with her, and it was just for two people. People have unique time, so they don't like to be disturbed by others. If he can find a remote mountain village to live in without anyone else, he would be willing to do so. "I don't like it. It would be nice if I could settle down. I just don't want to kill anyone anymore. It would be fine if the killing had a purpose." Yejin wanted to do it just because he didn't like it? He was completely arrogant. Such a person's character is unpredictable. It's really dangerous, but it's a pity that the two have been tied together for so many years, and now she can't leave even if she wants to get away. Lily originally wanted to mention Yarume, but seeing that Yejin didn't want to talk about the topic, she swallowed the words. Over the years, Yejin never mentioned Yarume. He didn't talk too much every day. What he talked the most about was asking Lily if she was thirsty or hungry. He always did more than he talked about. Along the way, he knew how to cook and serve. Lily does everything, and sometimes her eyes are as complex as a person she has known for many years. The person who was killed at night was discovered by the police during the day. Lily saw this news on her tablet computer. When she saw that the police had no suspects and no targets, she felt relieved. Whenever Yejin killed someone, he looked indifferent, but Lily had to be on tenterhooks for a long time. Now that the limelight had passed, Lily breathed a sigh of relief. The two of them had already driven away from the last city. Yejin drove the car smoothly, and Lily unknowingly, she put down her computer and fell asleep. She had just closed her eyes. Yejin, who had looked cold just now, turned around, carefully parked the car by the roadside, pulled Lily's head over and rested it on his shoulder. He trembled and wanted to take out the cigarette from his coat pocket, but he didn't want the smell of smoke to hit her. He had never smoked over the years, but whenever Lily fell asleep, he couldn't help it. This is the time when he is closest to Lily. After 5 years of being together, he has painstakingly created a top-secret environment where only the two of them live together day and night. However, although Lily is with him, she is very wary of him. He has failed in this life. There was a bit of self-deprecation in Yejin's eyes. The green shadow under his eyes was very thick. He hadn't slept all night. His eyes were filled with red bloodshot eyes. At this moment, he was staring at Lily with a complex expression. Feeling a bit disappointed, he moved his arms, and Lily seemed to blink her eyelashes. His raised arm was lowered again. Instead, she maintained a position that made her comfortable. He let her sleep on his arm. Even if this movement lasted for a long time, his arm soon became sore and numb, but he did not move. He just stared at Lily with his eyes lowered. The air conditioner was on in the car, but Yejin opened the window a little, and a stream of hot air blew into the car, easing the air conditioning in the car and bringing out a burst of fresh air. The temperature was just right, and Lily slept very deeply. When she opened her eyes and woke up, she was still leaning on Yejin. He was staring ahead expressionlessly, not knowing what he was looking at, and his facial features seemed carved. He was generally not popular at all, and showed a sense of desolation in his coldness. His hands were held up and pillowed under his face, keeping the height just right. No wonder he felt comfortable sleeping before and didn't drive. The wind outside the window blew gently in, and the heat brought in effectively relieved the air conditioning in the car. His eyes that were originally like glass moved, and he turned his head to look at Lily, with a delicate face. "Are you awake?" Lily nodded and sat up straight. Yejin still maintained the action of raising his hand just now. As soon as she left, his arm that was accustomed to her temperature quickly became cold, and a coldness seemed to drown him along the arm. After a while, Yejin took his hand back and shook it off as if nothing had happened. "How about I drive?" Lily saw the shadow under his eyes. Because Yejin's eye sockets were originally deep, the shadow made his eyes look decadent and beautiful. She saw that she had just rested on his arm. He didn't move. He must be feeling uncomfortable at this moment. Lily's eyes flashed, and she was about to open the car door and get out. Yejin originally shook his head, but seeing her actions, he hesitated and untied the safety belt, changed places with her. Yejin hasn't slept since he killed someone yesterday. The fatigue in his body has already come over him, but he stares at Lily, who is driving, with his eyes open. He doesn't have much time, even though he knows at this moment, his body has reached its limit, but he still refuses to close his eyes. Lily while driving has a serious charm, which is not the eyebrows and eyes he is used to seeing at first, but there is also a kind of calmness and tranquility. Yejin can almost see it. He was entranced, until Lily felt something was wrong and turned to look at him, then he blinked and gave Lily a slightly silly smile. He must be a little tired now, so when he smiled unconsciously, Lily couldn't help but smile too. Although she was a little wary of this person, Lily still lowered her voice and said, "Close your eyes. Get some sleep." Yejin nodded, and then he closed his eyes obediently. He quickly fell asleep. When the sunlight shined on his face through the glass, his face was so handsome that it seemed unreal. When his eyelids were closed and he couldn't see the sharp eyes with a bit of fierceness, his whole face looked much softer, and there was a bit of sadness between his brows. Lily turned to look at him a few times, and suddenly found herself getting along with him. After so many years, she actually didn't know him well. She only knew that he was murderous and ruthless, but he took good care of her, and sometimes she was so cautious that she couldn't help but feel a little moved. But she was still a little wary and afraid of him. The reasonless fear did not come from his murderous behavior, but from something else, as if the instinctive defense against him came from her bones. Lily sometimes tried to relax herself, but she couldn't. It didn't quite work. He probably felt it, but he didn't say it. He held the steering wheel with one hand and looked at Yejinzi's brows that were still furrowed tightly when he was sleeping. Some cold fingertips caressed his brows. He soon felt it. His eyes that were sleeping just now suddenly opened. Kai came, smiled subconsciously at Lily, and rubbed his head against Lily's fingertips. "It's very comfortable." His voice was a little hoarse, with the mistiness of just waking up. Lily was a little embarrassed, but seeing his behavior, she couldn't help but feel a little weak. "I haven't slept for long, let's sleep a little longer." Yejinzi responded lightly. He didn't want to sleep, but he didn't want to show it. Lily took the initiative to touch him for the first time. He didn't want to break the tranquility between the two of them, so he still closed his eyes and rested. Even if he wanted to open his eyes and look at her again, he didn't dare, for fear that she would take her hand back. His body was not in the relaxed state of a deep sleep, but instead looked like a wild leopard ready to attack. Lily knew that he was not asleep, but seeing that he didn't want to open his eyes, she simply parked the car aside and gently pulled his head. He came over and stretched out his hands to rub him. "I don't want to run anymore, and I'm tired of running. Let's find a place to live. Don't kill anyone again." Okay, this was the first time she spoke her true thoughts. Yejinzi's body stiffened. After a long while, he responded softly, "Yes." The two cuddled up to each other until the sun gradually set in the west. After taking a nap together, Yejinzi seemed to be in much better spirits than before. He took advantage of Lily's driving time to take the navigation and map to find where the two of them would settle down in the future. Lily occasionally glanced at him and saw him. "What I am looking for are all desolate mountains or very remote and uninhabited places." Yejinzi already knew something in his mind. He wanted to find a place where no one could disturb the two of them. He didn't know whether he wanted to isolate himself from the world, or he wanted to isolate himself from others. Lily had been with him for many years and had a deep relationship with him. Knowing the strong character in him, he didn't say anything. Yejinzi finally found a village, which was a very remote village. As early as decades ago, the young and middle-aged people in the village had been going out to work one after another, after seeing the prosperity of big cities. No one came back to the village, and there were only a few elderly families left in the village. They all live very far away, each house is about 10 minutes away from each other, and the rest of the surroundings are empty houses, very deserted. But he was very satisfied with it. He went to the village party secretary to complete the formalities of buying land and building a house. He didn't care about the strange look the old party secretary gave him. He didn't like asking people to help build houses. Just bought the materials by herself and worked slowly. Lily temporarily rested in an empty house that was cleaned out in the village. Half a year later, a small house was completed, and every brick and tile was made by Yejinzi. The two of them rented the fields in the village and grew some fruits and vegetables, and they lived a steady life. As the years passed, many other elderly people in the village passed away. When the village became more sparsely populated, almost the entire village within 100 miles had no residents. When there were no two households, Yejinzi was more satisfied with this situation. He worked at sunrise and rested at sunset every day. A person of his age seemed to have seen through the vicissitudes of the world. Bing gave up his previous wandering life. He could be the murderer who killed many people without batting an eyelid, or he could be an ordinary man living in peace and quiet now. In the days we were together, time passed very quickly, and decades passed in the blink of an eye. For many people, these decades are already very long days, but for Yejinzi, it is not enough at all. Almost every day I wish time could pass slower, but eventually life will come to an end. Lily's appearance has long since changed, and she is no longer the same as when she was young, but he still likes her. He reaches out to touch her body that has no body temperature, and holds her tightly in his arms. This life is his stolen life, so it stands to reason it seems that he should be very satisfied, but he is still unwilling. He pursued so much, but the final result was to be with Lily for the rest of his life. Even though she had been with him for decades, she still didn't love him. He could feel that Lily was a little wary of him. No matter how much he did, no matter how he restrained his nature, he still couldn't help but want to trap her outside the world. He just wanted to be able to see her. Being able to touch her, he couldn't bear the way others looked at her. Lily might understand in her heart that she might not like this kind of force. Yejinzi understood, but he couldn't control himself. He killed someone just because they disturbed the little time he had with her. No one knew that his time was borrowed and needed to be returned. He entered the world created by Li Yangzi for him and entered Yejinzi's body just to wait for reunion with Lily. In the original plot, he was supposed to wait 3 years to kill Yarume, but he didn't even wait for 3 years to kill Yarume. I couldn't wait, I didn't expect that the time passed so quickly in the end. The time around him seemed to freeze suddenly. Li Yangzi's figure appeared behind him. Yejinzi laughed softly, with a bit of bloodthirsty ferocity in his eyes. It came so fast he hugged the body tightly in his arms and didn't want to let go, but what he got was still only a skin. It was even possible that he wouldn't even be able to keep the skin. Li Yangzi didn't say anything. Yejinzi, who was originally wearing coarse cloth, quickly transformed into Yejinzi, who was wearing a military uniform. His body turned into a shadow, and the body he was holding in his hands fell back onto the bed. And finally slowly disappeared. The time has come, Li Yangzi sighed. Under the influence of Ye Changjin, his eyes began to darken. Although he still had a cold face, his expression looked a bit sinister. I know the time has come, but I still didn't get her after all. What did I do wrong? Ye Changjin asked in confusion. He likes Lily's. Want to get her. But Lily doesn't like him, and even the relationship between the two of them, which others think is husband and wife, is fake. Ye Changjin doesn't want to get her body now. If he wants to get her, he can have thousands of ways. But he tried all his means, but he couldn't win her heart. Emotions are really unpredictable. He had been persistent for so long and worked so hard, but all he got was nothing. If you can't get it, there's no point in living like this. Ye Changjin suddenly grinned, and a stern look flashed in his eyes, but after all, I am still not willing to accept it, even if I am gone. Maybe with you becoming one is the best ending. She trusts you, haha. Ye Changjin's laughter was a bit sad. His expression gradually became resolute, and he took the initiative to walk towards Li Yangzi. I no longer have myself. But as long as you are still me, you will still like her, you will still get her. I will disappear, but I still have a part of me. Her, even though that is no longer the complete him, he still wants it. There was a kind of persistence and ruthlessness in his character. Lily saw that he was ruthless and domineering towards others, but she did not see that he was also ruthless towards herself. After knowing that after losing the opportunity, even if it means destroying himself, if he can get what he has been pursuing, he is willing. Li Yangzi waited for him to approach. Ye Changjin slowly returned to his body with the power he had separated from him. Ye Changjin released all his memories and emotions over the years without resistance. Li Yangzi slowly I closed my eyes, and it felt good that the missing part of my body had finally returned. However, I don't know if it was due to Ye Changjin's influence, but there was always a sense of sadness in my originally calm heart. Li Yangzi transferred Ye Changjin to Jin, carefully read through the memories of this life. When he entered Ye Jinzi's body, he killed Yerume, who was supposed to be killed 3 years later, fled to the end of the world with Lily, and used all means and methods to force her to isolate herself from the world. With only himself beside him, he couldn't help but laugh softly. Silly, this method will only push her further. Ye Jinzi's behavior was monopolistic and greedy. While he monopolized all of Lily's attention, he was actually always feeling a little uneasy deep down about the person who was entangled with him. He told several stories. The most stubborn and powerful desire, which he thought was the hardest to conquer, ended up being the first to return to his body. Li Yangzi flicked his fingers, and the world began to collapse rapidly. The original Ye Jinzi suddenly appeared. There was no fierce expression when Ye Jinzi was in his body, only some fear and cowardice. He was originally a character in the plot. He was severely beaten and abused by his adoptive parents since he was a child. At the age of 17, he was sold into a cowherd shop and lived a depraved life. One day, a middle-aged woman named Yerume suddenly came to him and said that her love life was unhappy and that she had a crush on him at first sight. Ye Jinzi had been working in such a place for a long time and was already drunk and dreaming. He coaxed her with sweet words, and finally got along with her intimately for 3 years. He thought he had found a generous sponsor, but suddenly one day, the sponsor told him in a panic that she was his mother. She said that she wanted to make up for him properly and cut off this inappropriate relationship in the future. When the big mistake had been made, the woman who gave birth to him and then destroyed him only said one word of compensation. Wanting him to leave with a huge sum of money, Ye Jinzi raised a knife at her in pain. Although the police did not catch him in the end, the pain of self-resentment entangled him in his short life. He lived a very unwilling life. He was haunted by resentment every day. He was afraid of the police and he was afraid of hearing people mention the 2 sacred things of his mother. He made a wish to God, hoping that he could go back in time and do it again. One day, his wish suddenly came true, and someone entered his identity and lived for him. From then on, Yerume's cancer was removed, and there was no psychological burden. His wish came true. To be continued. P.S. 2 updates in 1. Please note that this is 2 updates in 1. There are 4 updates in total today. 2 chapters have been updated, and there are 2 updates left at 5 o'clock and 7 o'clock. Thanks to Instant Kill Potato, Dear Heshabai, who gave the reward. Now during the double fan vote period, there are only a few dozen votes left to guarantee double updates next month. Everyone, wait for me. Anyone with small fan votes is teasing me. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Cannon Fodder Strategy. Author, Juan ERWR. Chapter 367. Lily, who returned to the starry sky, was still a little dizzy for a while. She felt a little heavy in her heart for no reason. After reaching out to cover her chest, she frowned and gritted her teeth. The starry sky was quiet. After a long time, Li Yangzi appeared in the starry sky. Here, when she saw Li Yangzi again this time, Lily always felt that there were some changes in him, but he was still the same person, but Lily couldn't tell what had changed. Mission accomplished. Li Yangzi's eyes flashed with gentleness. After possessing all of Ye Changjin's memories and emotions, naturally Ye Changjin's feelings for Lily also affected him. In the past, Li Yangzi had some feelings for Lily. He didn't know what was going on, but now he understood everything. He glanced at Lily, his eyelids drooped, and Lily's information appeared in the starry sky. Gender, female, variable. Name, Lily. Age, 21. Intelligence, 79, out of 100. Appearance, 82, out of 100. Physical strength, 71, 100 full points. Force, 45, out of 100 points. Spirit, 61, out of 100 points. Reputation, 32, out of 100 points. Skills, 9 Yang Manual, 9 Yin Manual, Heaven and Earth Gate Tao Te Ching, Southern Gu Technique, Star Body Training Technique. Specialties, Intermediate Cooking Skills, Advanced Acting Skills, 5 Elements, and Bagua, Slight Dabbling. Charisma, 56, out of 100. Collection, The Love of the Corpse King, The Blessing of the Saint, The Heart of the Angel, The Dragon King's Promise, The Charm of the Fox, Mother's Love as a Mountain, The Uncrowned King, The Way of the Sword, The Warlord's Obsession. I don't know if the difficulty of this mission is not that high. In addition to the slight increase in rewards for spirit and charm, the reputation has actually been deducted a bit. And in the collection column. But there is another collection of Warlord's Obsession somehow. When Lily saw this collection, she felt inexplicably uncomfortable. She thought of Ye Changjin this time. Ye Jinzi's character seemed to have nothing to do with Ye Changjin. It was not that Ye Changjin gave her the sense of oppression and the feeling of wanting to escape from fear, but in a certain aspect, it was there are some similarities, the same domineering and the same strength. She has encountered warlords before during the mission except entering Ye Changjin. They haven't met her again since then, but when she saw the sudden increase in collections, Lily didn't understand. Ye Jinzi might be Ye Yingjin. She was stunned for a while, and her heart couldn't help but feel a little heavy. She laughed twice, and Li Yangzi, who stood beside her at some point, took her into his arms without any warning. Lily was a little dazed at first. Just as she was about to struggle, Li Yangzi lowered her head and glanced at her, as if a little strange. Last time you completed the task. Didn't you like this? He looked serious, but Lily felt a little embarrassed. Because she was taken advantage of in the plot of the last mission, and she hadn't seen Li Yangzi for a long time, she lost control of her emotions for a while. It wasn't that Li Yangzi wanted to hug her every time the mission was completed, but now she saw seeing Li Yangzi's serious and cold expression, Lily was a little embarrassed to tell him the truth, so she nodded stiffly and let him hug her for a while. Then Li Yangzi let her go, with a slight smile on her face, and then it formed a straight line at an extremely fast speed. Do you want to enter the mission? Lily breathed a sigh of relief and nodded hurriedly. Being hugged by Li Yangzi, no matter how much sadness she had, they all disappeared. Before she fell asleep, she didn't see Li Yangzi smile. His eyelids drooped to block the thoughts in his eyes. His handsome and cold appearance, it is a little less ethereal than before, as if it was not connected to the fireworks of the world, but a little more powerful. Your Majesty, take care of your body. Although Concubinda is favored by the Emperor now, it doesn't matter if she is pregnant. After all, it is just a medicine jar. It is not certain whether the fetus can be saved. A delicate female voice chirped in Lily's ear. As soon as Lily woke up, she heard someone talking non-stop in her ears, as if someone was beating her head with something. She couldn't help but reach out to rub her forehead, and a pair of soft little hands stretched out. He gently rubbed her forehead with moderate force, causing Lily to sigh comfortably. She waved her hand, and the person next to her suddenly fell silent, and the person who was rubbing her head quickly retreated and turned to squeeze her shoulders. A large amount of plots came into her mind, and Lily squinted her eyes without making a sound. Now that her mental strength has improved, it is much easier to accept the plots than before. It only took about 2 hours for Lily to finish receiving a large section of the plots. This time she became a woman named Guo Beihe, who was once favored in the palace but ended up being defeated in a fight and was deposed as a concubine. Guo Beihe comes from a famous family. Her grandfather was a founding hero. He was given a title by the emperor of the Qin dynasty and was granted the title of duke. Hereditary status does not mean honor. Guo Beihe was the legitimate second daughter since she was a child. Because of her charming appearance, she was named after her 15th birthday. Sent to the palace. Guo Beihe has a cheerful and lively personality since she was a child. At first, the young emperor liked her personality very much. Soon she was promoted to the rank of a concubine at the age of 19. In the end, she became a noble concubine. The harem is in the limelight. But gradually the number of beauties in the harem increased, especially when she was 21 years old. After her nemesis, Yang Yuru, entered the palace, she offended Guo Beihe from the beginning. Guo Beihe had framed her several times, but failed to do so. Yang Yuru's repeated escapes contributed to the mutual acquaintance and mutual respect between Yang Yuru and the emperor. In the end, Guo Beihe, a spoiled and domineering concubine, was naturally stripped of her title and sentenced to death by the emperor for murdering many concubines in the palace and out of anger. In addition to a large number of secrets in the palace, the plot also contains some scenes of battles between Guo Beihe and Yang Yuru. Yang Yuru was originally from a neither high nor low background. Although Yang Yuru had a beautiful appearance, the original owner was many times stronger than her. In the end, more than it was because he couldn't defeat her, but after his death, his family was implicated, and the Dingguo Palace, which was originally favored, was also confiscated. On the contrary, the Yang family finally replaced the Guo family, and Yang Yuru's father even accepted the legacy left by Guo Beihe's father. The power that had come down was greatly improved because of Yang Yuru, and the Yang family became a new noble in the court. The most important thing is that Guo Beihe was told by Yang Yuru before she died that the emperor did not like her. Even if he favored her at the beginning, it was just because he wanted to clean up the Guo family. The first emperor gave the Guo family too much power, and the Guo family she was too arrogant, so the emperor wanted to find an excuse to take back his power. However, Guo Beihe had not given birth for many years after entering the palace. In the end, she killed the children of other palace concubines. It was not God giving her retribution, but the emperor forbidding her. It's just pregnancy. Guo Beihe was naturally not willing to die after knowing all this. After Lily received the plot, she couldn't help but reach out and rub her head again. The person behind her took the opportunity to come forward and gently massage her temples, soothing the headache she had just received from receiving the plot. Guo Beihe's most important wishes were two. First, she wanted to make Yang Yuru, a bitch, worse than death. Even if she had to sacrifice her own life, she would drag her with her to die. The second is to save the Guo family. Even if the Guo family cannot be saved, Guo Lily hopes that the Yang family will never get ahead, otherwise she would rather use dirty means to kill Yang Yuru's father. In fact, there are many trivial wishes. Another important one is that Guo Beihe is a little unwilling. She doesn't understand why the emperor doesn't love her. She has been in the palace for several years, even if her subordinates are unclean, but she only cares about young people. The emperor truly loved each other and had always regarded him as her husband, but she did not expect that the husband in her heart fell in love with someone else in the end. Guo Beihe hoped that Beihe could help her get favored. If not, then Yang Yuru must also Lily's fall from grace follows this death. This is an extreme woman who would rather die together. She will never allow others to get what she can't get. Guo Beihe acts openly and willfully. In her short lifespan of 22 years, the first 21 years almost went smoothly. It was the first time that Lily encountered a mission target with such a personality, and she couldn't help but feel a little headache. The palace ladies who gently rubbed her shoulders were Guo Beihe's four palace ladies, namely Fu Feng, Fu Lu, Fu Qin, and Fu Yu. After Yang Yuru entered the palace, because her name was similar to Fu Yu, she also on the first day that Yang Yuru entered the palace, she offended Guo Beihe, so she bluntly humiliated Yang Yuru and ordered her to change her name. Such domineering behavior was finally spread to the emperor's ears, making him even more disgusted, and instead developed a hatred for Yang Yuru. Interest. Beihe came to this task just before Yang Yuru entered the palace. Guo had just been canonized as a noble concubine for half a year. It was still about half a year before Yang Yuru entered the palace. "Is your majesty feeling better? Do you want to call the doctor to come and check your pulse?" Fu Feng knelt in front of Lily and pinched her legs. Everyone understood that Fu Feng meant that Lily wanted to use the excuse of being sick. Inviting the emperor to the palace, Guo was not very popular among the concubines in the harem. Everyone was afraid that she would hate her, but no one dared to openly go against her, except Su, the most beloved concubine of the current emperor. Almost everyone sees Guo, even if he curses in his heart, he has to please and welcome her. But for such a master that everyone hates, the people in her palace are very loyal to her. The 4 girls are very loyal to her. After being deposed, they all bumped into pillars and died. Guo wanted to live well, even if Behi couldn't survive. She also hoped that Behi could release these girls out of the palace for her. The task this time is not easy. The harem has been a place for cannibalism since ancient times. In addition, Guo can be said to have a lot of wishes. Although her wishes are selective, it also makes Behi feel a little overwhelmed. Later, when he heard Fu Feng talking about finding a medical girl, and then thought about what Fu Liu had said about concubine Su's pregnancy when she was receiving the plot, resentment welled up in her heart for no reason. To be continued. Canon Fodder Strategy. Author, Wan Erwr. Chapter 368. Before Yang Yuru entered the palace, this Su family was the object of Guo resentment. Su family was originally the daughter of the Minister of Household Affairs, 2 years older than Guo. When she entered the palace in her early years, she had an affair with Prince Chu, who was still the crown prince at the time. Yunyang had met once before, and Chu Yunyang had left a very deep impression on this delicate beauty. However, the Su family had already made an engagement with someone, and Chu Yunyang himself had a princess. Even though I thought it was amazing at first, I didn't really take it to heart. Unexpectedly, Su's fortune was so poor that her fiancé passed away before the wedding. The engagement was naturally terminated, but Su's age was delayed. It was not until Chu Yunyang succeeded to the throne that he remembered the daughter of the minister of Hubyu whom he had met before. When filling the harem, Behi brought her into the palace 2 years later. She was already almost 20 years old when she entered the palace, and she was already over 20 years old. During the period when she was in the imperial examination, but whether it was because it was difficult to obtain, Chu Yunyang still doted on her. In a short period of time, he promoted her status one after another, and finally mentioned her as concubine. The position is only 1 step lower than Guo. Now that bitch of the Su family is pregnant, isn't the emperor going to make her the queen? Thinking of this, Lily couldn't help but curse. Before Chu Yunyang sat on the throne, the crown prince she passed away due to dystocia, and the position of queen was not established after she ascended the throne. Now many women in the harem are eyeing that position, and Guo is no exception. When Behi opened her mouth, everyone was shocked, even if they were in their hearts. If you think like this, you shouldn't say it out loud, otherwise walls have ears and it will be a big disaster if someone hears you. Your Majesty, please calm down. If your Majesty is dissatisfied, just think of a way to deal with it. Fu knelt on the ground and moved a few steps. At the same time, he took a beauty beater and knocked Lily's legs. He came up with an idea. Last time, didn't my wife give the Empress a statue of Guanyin? Soak it in some spices. Give it to concubine, so she won't dare not accept it. Such a simple and crude method. Before Lily could shake her head, she agreed with the thought in her mind. Guo did this in the plot, but the concubine Su was already weak and sick. Even though the Su family nursed her back to health for many years, the root cause of her illness fell into place, and her pregnancy was not stable. Originally, she failed to save the baby in the end, but Guo last move in the plot was just to cause her fetus to fall out early. In the end, Chu Yunyang was furious, and he gave Guo Beihe a good scolding, which made her lose face. This time, regardless of the thought in her mind that Fu's idea was feasible, Lily pursed her lips tightly and said nothing. But in the heart of the emperor, the empress is always more important. Seeing that Beihe didn't speak, Fu Feng and others thought that Beihe was feeling uncomfortable, so they couldn't help but comfort her. Before Yang Yuru entered the palace, it was true that Beihe Guo was the most important person in the palace. Zhang Yang is the most favored one. But although Chu Yunyang was resting in Zikan Palace where Guo Beihe lived, he didn't always have to be happy with her. Almost most of the time, it is mainly about resting. To outsiders, Guo Beihe, a noble concubine, is very beautiful, but sometimes Chu Yunyang will be lucky to have a few low-level cronies living in her palace, but not necessarily every time. He wanted to touch her every time. Whenever these plots came to Lily's mind, the original owner's unwillingness to be jealous would flood into her heart. Lily didn't say anything. Sushi was always a big taboo of her confidant. Sushi and Yang Yuru were the two people who kept causing trouble for Guo Beihe. Although the original owner didn't hate Sushi the most, he didn't like her. Although Guo Beihe hoped that Yang Yuru fell out of favor and died in the end, but she also didn't want the Su family to have a good ending. Since Lily entered this task, she naturally wanted to satisfy the original owner. There is no need to give it away to Guanyin, and I don't want to see how lucky she is and whether she can bear it. Lily thought for a while and sat up straight with a smile. Several palace servants took her and inlaid her with pearls and jade. The armor was put on for her, and Lily took 2 steps down to the ground. In half a year, it will be the time for the draft. Now that the middle palace has no owner, I should also fill in the emperor's harem now, so that people can come here with some painted files, and ask concubines De and Xian to come over and take a good look at them with me. When Guo Beihe was favored, Chu Yunyang once gave her a piece of incense, which had a quiet and unique smell. It was said that it was sent as tribute from a small border country. Every year, it only got a little bit, and no one else had it. Only Guo Beihe had it. Once it was sent, it would be taken by Chu Yunyang was all sent to Guo Beihe's palace, which was also one of the certificates that Guo Beihe doted on the harem. But later Yang Yuru personally told Guo Beihe that the incense was made of musk and safflower. The reason why I have been unable to get pregnant for many years since entering the palace, all because of the incense. Chu Yunyang did not have many children. His first wife died in childbirth. Over the years, there were only 2 princesses in the harem. No son has been born so far. Guo Beihe never thought that Chu Yunyang would not want him under such circumstances. She gave birth to an heir for him, and Guo Beihe respected and loved him too much, so she didn't expect that he would do something to her, and she was completely defenseless, so that in the end, her body broke down and she could no longer give birth to a child. Lily deliberately summoned Concubine to come. The relationship between her and Concubine was not good. Concubine came from a scholarly family and had the rotten temper of a scholar. She couldn't stand it. Guo Beihe also couldn't stand Guo Beihe's domineering personality and ruthless methods. Guo Beihe also couldn't stand her pretending to be aloof, but in fact she clung to Chu Yunyang tightly. Even the superficial affinity between the two, none of them were maintained, and Concubine had always refused to give Guo Beihe face. The relationship between the two was mutually disliked, and everyone in the harem knew it. Today, Lily sent someone to call Concubine, but Su would definitely not come. As expected, the people who were sent out came back with news, saying that Empress De Fei was unwell and the medical lady had told her to stay in bed and not go out. Lily sneered, and Fu Feng and others began to curse. But the Su family didn't come. Before dinner, Chu Yunyang's personal chamberlain Huang Eunuch sent his adopted son to deliver a message, saying that the emperor was going to visit Zikan Palace today and asked Lily to wait to pick him up. Except for Guo Beihe, a noble concubine who is qualified to spend the night with Chu Yunyang, The other concubines in the harem usually need to be washed and carried to Ganlin Palace before going to bed. In the past, the same was true when Chu Yuniang wanted to summon Guo Beihe. Today Lily laughed softly at the news that she was going to come over. She thought of how she was going to send someone to summon concubine Su in the afternoon. Chu Yuniang should be here for Su. Fu Feng and others were almost overjoyed when they heard the saying. They hurriedly asked people to prepare ointment and asked the kitchen to prepare hot water, tea, and other items. Fu Feng and others even took a piece of ointment from the box. The fat is ready to be put into the incense burner. This is an aphrodisiac bomb, only a particle as small as a fingernail. This thing is forbidden in the palace and is not allowed to be used. It's just that Guo Beihe appears to be favored, but in fact Chu Yuniang has not touched her for several months. In her anxiety, she begged Mrs. Guo to bring a piece with her when she entered the palace. This thing would not be used in Ganlin Palace, because at that time she had to be washed, stripped naked, and carried into Ganlin Palace. It is not allowed to carry any weird fragrance, and it is only used in the palace. When Lily saw this thing, her eyes couldn't help but roll, and she waved to Fu Feng. Don't throw it in there yet. The people around Guo Beihe were loyal to her, but both the master and the servant were stupid. They blatantly seduced the emperor and drugged them. If they were found out afterwards, it would be another piece of evidence of guilt. Your Majesty. Fu Feng looked back at Lily in surprise, but saw Lily purse her lips and smile. Don't use it yet, apply it all on me, and then wash it off. Everyone didn't understand what Lily's move meant. Lily had to use such a precious plaster on her body in the end, and had to wash it off after use. Fu Feng and others looked at each other, and after a long while, they looked sad. Agreed. After all this tossing, it was already half an hour later. When Chu Yuniang came, Lily felt uncomfortable at the same time. The onset of the plaster did not last long. Although she had washed away some of it, but now still, there seemed to be a ball of fire rising up in her lower abdomen. When Chu Yuniang came over, Lily's cheeks were on fire and she bowed down to him, which surprised Chu Yuniang. The king of the Great Qin dynasty ascended the throne when he was less than 20 years old. He has only been on the throne for 5 years now. He was still handsome when he was young. He was tall, and his green cloud dragon stand collar robe made him look handsome. He was not serious. His expression, on the contrary, is that the corners of his eyes are slender and raised up, and the corners of his mouth are often smiling, but the lips are light and very thin, showing ruthlessness and meanness, and there is a bit of evil in the eyes, which is very seductive. My dearest concubine Chu Yuniang strode into the palace. When he passed Lily, he didn't help her. He just smelled the faint fragrance on her body, but he stood for a while and frowned slightly. Lily stood up, feeling like a fire was burning in her heart. She thanked her and straightened up and entered the palace. Chu Yuniang stood in the room first and saw the incense burner placed on the table in the palace. The smoke slowly rose, and the corners of his mouth curled up in satisfaction. He found a soft couch and sat down, and only asked his personal attendant to bring a memorial to approve it. Lily knelt down and sat beside him. Chu Yuniang didn't even look at her at first, but after a long time, it was rare to see Lily. He was so contented that he couldn't help but turn his head to look at her. At this glance, he realized that Lily seemed to have changed. Although she still had the same eyebrows and eyes, she looked much more comfortable. Her previously aggressive beauty became much gentler now. 2 clouds of red glow appeared on her cheeks, making her already delicate appearance even more charming. Chu Yuniang had not been lucky for a few days. Palace man, although the beauty does not like Guo Lily at the moment, today's Lily makes him look at him differently. His heart moved, and he was about to put down the memorial in his hand when someone came in from outside to report. Back to the emperor, the concubine Xian of Yuhang Palace seems to have had a bad stomach today. Now she wants to invite the emperor to come and have a look. To be continued. Cannon Fodder Strategy. Author, Juan ERWR. Chapter 369. After the Chamberlain said this, Lily couldn't help but laugh in her heart. Concubine Da was not summoned today, but Concubine Cien came obediently. Lily asked someone to add something cold to the tea she was served. Concubine Cien had diarrhea when she returned home after using it too much. Before dinner, I heard that she had called a doctor. The diarrhea must have become more serious now. Chu Yuniang was originally full of alluring ideas, but when he heard this, he looked at the faint smile at the corner of Beihi's mouth, and his eyes flashed. I'm not a medical girl, so what's the point of asking me? Someone invited a medical girl over. Although the Middle Palace has been empty since Chu Yuniang ascended the throne, the position of the four concubines is only concubine Yushu who has not been canonized. The concubine Cien is petite and cute. She is not a stunning beauty like Guo Beihi, nor is she like Consort Su. She was pitiful, but her soft and charming body had attracted Chu Yuniang's liking in the past. No one thought that he would let Xianfei's people go back. When Lily was also surprised, Chu Yuniang pulled her up and hugged her into his arms. He reached out and gently stroked her waist with his fingers. I see, my beloved concubine seems to have lost some weight. Everyone hurriedly retreated. When Lily was spinning around and picked up by him, her soul also floated out. Guo Lily's body in the palace was very enthusiastic and proactive because she had used aphrodisiac spices in advance. The upper body was left with only instinctive reactions, without any shyness. For a moment, it was dry wood and strong fire. Seeing that it was almost time, Lily hurriedly called Li Yangzi to go down. She called several times before her soul finally fell back into her body. At this moment, her clothes were messy and she was restrained by Chu Yuniang. Chu Yuniang's jade crown was tilted to the side, and her long hair was hanging down. The originally neat clothes were already half open at this time. As if he was too anxious to take off his clothes. When Lily was about to lift up her skirt, Lily couldn't help but push him. Instead of pushing him away, she was shaken by the force of the backlash and rolled out from under Chu Yuniang to the bottom of the bed. Chu Yuniang's eyes were filled with anger at this time. He couldn't help but grinned and sneered, "Where do you want to go, my dear concubine?" He stretched out his hand to grab Lily. Lily hurriedly grabbed her collar and crawled on the ground for 2 steps to hide away. She smiled softly and said, "Your Majesty, I suddenly remembered. The geranium suddenly arrived this afternoon. I don't dare to defile it any more, Your Majesty, please move to another palace and find other sisters." Chu Yuniang was stunned for a moment. He didn't expect that Lily would say such words at this critical moment. It was like someone pouring cold water on his head. In the past, he had left Guo Lily to dry, but now he heard that hearing Lily's words, his eyes flickered, and the smile on the corner of his mouth had an enchanting and evil aura. "I want to see. Is it true or false?" Lily originally thought that he would walk away based on his personality, but she didn't expect that Chu Yuniang would actually say that he wanted to check. After being stunned for a moment, she regained consciousness. She was angry and anxious. She stood up and was about to run. However, before she could run a few steps away, Chu Yuniang jumped off the bed with great skill and stepped on her skirt. On top of it, she suddenly couldn't hold back her strength and threw herself straight to the ground. Chu Yuniang snorted coldly, pulled her loose belt, and easily pulled her into his arms. Without the slightest thought of pity, Lily threw Lily onto the bed. In her daze, Lily only felt that her body became lighter again. As expected, Guo Lily's body was stripped clean by Chu Yuniang on the gorgeous big bed in the palace. Lily today, he planned to use a trick to drive away Chu Yuniang's anger. He originally thought that it would make him full of anger, but also made concubine Cien suffer from diarrhea. He must have no choice but to go to concubine Da. By then, he would be young and full of energy. And she still has the incense he personally gave her in his palace. Concubine Da will lose half her life even if she doesn't have an abortion if he messes with him. Unexpectedly, Chu Yuniang is so shameless. She has already told General Kuishui but he refused to believe it. Originally, Guo Beihe's little life was just these few days. Beihe originally thought that even if she said it was early, no one would be able to find any mistakes. The medicine she administered was not used on the emperor but on herself. Even if someone finds out, it doesn't matter, but he has considered everything, but he has not considered that Chu Yuniang, who has always disliked Guo Beihe, would force her. Even with Li Yangzi's help, Beihe still felt unspeakable disgust in her heart. She looked at the scene under the bed and turned her head away in annoyance. Chu Yuniang made trouble with Guo Beihe's body all night long until dawn. At this time, the eunuch on guard outside called out, and he sat up. Lily did not return to her body until someone from the palace cleaned her up and changed her clothes, and Li Yangzi sent her back after daybreak. The blanket has been replaced on the bed, and the ambiguous atmosphere in the palace has long been blown away. Lily opened her eyes lazily, barely wanting to move her fingers. Fu Fengfuliu and others knelt on the soft couch. The emperor was holding her shoulders and waist for her. When Lily opened her eyes, Fu came forward happily and said, "Congratulations to the empress, congratulations to the empress. Now I just hope that God will favor me and the empress can win a son in one fell swoop. Then it's the best." When Lily heard this, she couldn't help but sneered twice in her heart. Fu Feng and the others didn't know that her body had been so poisoned that she couldn't give birth to a child. Even if she was lucky enough to get pregnant, she would probably have to abort it, but luckily Guo Beihe also she should know this, so although she has a lot of wishes, she has regrets about the child, but she doesn't force it. Lily doesn't want to give Chu Yuniang a child. Yesterday, she felt soreness in her waist and a dull pain in her abdomen. It should be because she smelled too much incense such as safflower and musk. Even if she adjusted her body, she still felt pain every time the sunflower water came. Sure enough, in the afternoon, a stream of heat surged out of her lower abdomen, and the breeze and so on. When the person was waiting for her to wash herself, she had a look of disappointment on her face. In the evening, Chu Yuniang actually sent a servant over to convey the message that he was coming. Lily was a little impatient. She was not feeling well now. Guo Lily's body would suffer from unbearable abdominal pain when menstruation came. After entering the palace in the past few years, she has seen many medical women, but to no avail. In addition, she used plaster yesterday to plot against the Su family, but in the end she plotted against herself. This was the time of suffering. When Chu Yuniang came over, her hair was disheveled and she was not wearing any complicated palace attire. She was only wearing comfortable clothes. She was holding a hand stove. She was leaning on the soft couch and huddled up. When she heard the eunuch's announcement, she was wearing heavy makeup in the past. There was a look of disgust on Er's unpainted face. Perhaps he didn't expect that the eunuch had already barged in before he finished singing "The Emperor has arrives." Lily was still not getting off the ground, and she was stunned when she saw Chu Yuniang. After a while, she became a little emotionless. He leaned down and said, "Hail, Your Majesty. My beloved, there is no need to be polite." Before Chu Yuniang could finish his words, Lily thanked her and stood up again. "Why didn't Your Majesty go see Sister Su today?" "Because she was here on a small day, she didn't light the incense in the Lily Palace to torture herself." She forced out a smile and had no intention of scheming against the Su family for a moment. The piece of flesh in her belly just wanted to drive Chu Yuniang out of her palace so that she could rest. Sister De Fei has always been in poor health, and she is sentimental in nature. The emperor has not been seen for 2 days in a row. It is time for her to think wildly. Still unable to hold it back, Lily's words brought out a bit of acrimony towards Su. After saying this, she frowned. Chu Yunyang stared at her with a half-smile but not a smile, with a bit of amusement in his eyes. In the past, when Guo Beihe said these words, his expression and tone were always annoyingly arrogant. Now Beihe still said the same words. But her personality changed, becoming cold and a bit contemptuous. He knew clearly that she was giving sushi eye drops in front of him, but he didn't know if it was because she had changed since yesterday. Chu Yunyang, he didn't think she looked disgusting at this time, but instead felt a bit of interest and suspicion in his heart. He wasn't angry at her words, so he stepped forward and hugged Lily's waist and said, "My dear concubine, are you having a taste of it?" "Will my concubine eat her taste?" Lily couldn't help but sneered when she heard this. No matter how favored Sister Su is, even if she has merit in giving birth to the prince, she still has to call me sister when she sees me. In this harem, older people are not respected, and their status are inferior to others. Even though Su is more than 2 years older than Lily, no matter how unhappy she is with Lily, she still has to respond when Lily calls her sister. It is precisely because of this that the Su family usually avoids seeing Guo Beihe when she can. In addition, Guo Beihe acts too domineeringly and fiercely. After the Su family considers herself to be a loyal and good person, she has no relationship with Guo Beihe, who controls the government. The Duke's daughter is completely different, so the relationship between her and her is naturally the same. Guo Beihe has been running rampant in the harem for many years. She has the support of her mother's family and has status in the palace, while the Su family has the favor of the emperor. In the past, the two of them, Guo Beihe was a little afraid of her when they were fighting against each other, but Lily was not afraid of her now. Anyway, as long as the two most important wishes of the original owner were fulfilled, she didn't care about the rest being favored by the emperor. Naturally, she didn't care after Chu Yunyang heard this. "Are you unhappy?" Anyway, Chu Yunyang in the plot has never liked Guo Beihe. Even if she goes too far, the end result will be the same as the original owner. My temper is getting more and more indulgent. When Chu Yunyang heard this, he raised the corners of his mouth slightly, a dark and inexplicable light flashed in his eyes, and the smile on the corner of his mouth was a bit evil. "If you don't like it, please don't mention her from now on. You used some good stuff yesterday, but I smelled something wrong. It's an aphrodisiac used by some women." As soon as Lily said this, Chu Yunyang probably didn't expect that she would confess like this, but he was stunned for a moment. "You use medicine?" "I am using it on myself, not on the emperor." "Isn't it against the palace rules?" Lily stared at Chu Yunyang from the corner of her eyes. When she was about to speak again, she saw him laughing softly. "Then use more." To be continued. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Canon Fodder Strategy. Author, Wan Erwr. Chapter 370. Chu Yunyang's voice became lower and lower, and his hands began to play dishonestly around Lily's waist again. Lily lowered her head and wanted to run away. This time she was not wearing the dragging palace dress yesterday. In the light uniform, Chu Yunyang did not catch her, but let her hide away. Chu Yunyang was stunned, with a sarcastic smile like a cat and mouse in his eyes, and his thin lips he grinned and said, "Want to play tricks? Your Majesty, my concubine Kuishui is here." After saying this, seeing the disbelief on Chu Yunyang's face, Lily felt furious. This time it's true. Chu Yunyang, who had been smiling just now, suddenly turned gloomy when he heard this. He turned over his face like turning over a book. Lily was not afraid either. He bowed to himself and said with a smile, "I'm afraid, I am the concubine. If you have neglected the emperor, why don't you ask the chamberlain in the reception room to bring the cards over, and the emperor will look through them to see which one is better." She looked impatient, and Chu Yunyang couldn't help but laugh again, looking gloomy and laughing at times, as if he was insane. Originally, Lily wanted to wait for him to leave, but to his surprise, he refused to leave. Instead, he sat down and asked the valet to take the papers and approve them. Lily cursed several times in her heart, and knelt down for a while. Her waist was really sore. It felt uncomfortable, and my lower abdomen felt cold. In the end, I couldn't hold it any longer. I summoned the courage to call Fu Feng to come in and prepare a clean mugwort bag for me again. After sorting it out, it was already dark outside. At this moment, the palace is almost locked up. He urged Chu Yunyang again without leaving a trace, but he still didn't leave in the end, and instead stayed overnight in Zikan Palace. At night, when her stomach ached uncomfortably, a warm hand rubbed her lower abdomen. Lily was half asleep and pushed him impatiently. Chu Yunyang was stunned at first. Finally he laughed softly. Guo Bei, he didn't dare to treat him like this. She didn't dare Lily Guo. No matter how domineering she was in front of others, she was still obedient and gentle in front of herself. This was not Lily Guo, she was not Lily Guo. She didn't sleep well all night. Chu Yunyang didn't know if he was too energetic at night. He would either touch her hair or her face, as if he was looking for something. Even if Lily didn't get out of bed anymore, she was still angry because of him. Until it was almost 5 o'clock, the waiter called out. "Your Majesty, it's almost 5 o'clock." I thought Chu Yunyang had quickly put on his clothes and left, but to his surprise, he didn't even look back and said lazily, "In a while." Although the emperors of the Great Qin dynasty were very diligent, they usually got up around 5 o'clock to pack up and prepare to go to court to meet the civil and military officials. The same is true for Chu Yunyang in the plot. Lily was also looking forward to it, but when she heard this, it was like a bucket of cold water was poured down on her head, and she couldn't hold it back. Pretending to be woken up, he rubbed his eyes, turned sideways and asked softly, "What time is it?" Although the emperor said he was not in a hurry, eunuch Huang on the side was anxious. When he heard Lily's question, he said in a panic, "It's already the end of the 4th update to reply to the imperial concubine." Lily sat up immediately, glared, and hurriedly ordered someone to light the lamp. "Why don't you bring hot water and come in to wait for the emperor to wash himself?" Chu Yunyang lay still, his satin-like hair that was as meticulously maintained as the women in the harem spread all over the bed. He put Lily's hair in the palm of his hand with only a slight exertion. Lily's scalp hurt, and he couldn't bear it. She fell into his arms again and said, "Take a rest for a while." As he spoke, he reached out to cover Lily's eyes. Although his voice was still hoarse, his tone became colder, "Get back." Several chamberlains who had brought hot water in dragon robes had no choice but to retreat. Lily was leaning in Chu Yunyang's arms, which was very painful. Even though she was very sleepy, she couldn't sleep at all. This man was so, there was a cold feeling, which was different from the psychological pressure that Ye Changjin put on her. She was instinctively afraid of this coldness, as if she had encountered it before somewhere before. She didn't like this feeling, and her body was frozen and trapped by him. For a long time, until it was almost 5 o'clock in the morning, Chu Yunyang sat up. Because it was too late, he didn't even use breakfast after washing, so he wore the dragon robe and crown while walking. For the first time, someone in the harem saw the hurried side of the always aloof emperor. Several servants trotted beside him to buckle his belt and crown him with beads. This scene made the rumor that the imperial concubine was favored deepened. For several days in a row, it seemed that Chu Yunyang suddenly favored Lily again. It was customary in the harem that from the 1st to the 15th day of the lunar month, the lower-ranking concubines would be turned over by the emperor, and the positions would be arranged in order from low to high. From 5 to 30, the third concubine starts from the third concubine and goes down. The third concubine has a fixed bedtime, and the rest of the concubines depend on the emperor's mood. But recently, Chu Yunyang has not summoned the lower-level concubines. Either people summon Lily to Ganlin Palace, or they occasionally come to Zikin Palace where Lily is to sleep for a night. In this way, Lily will naturally attract people's jealousy. Under such uncharacteristic favor from Chu Yuniang, Lily originally wanted to take advantage of this period of time to sort out the album of beauties presented to her, but in the end she had no time to sort it out and left it all to her subordinates such as Fu Feng and the other four. People did it. Seeing that the day of the draft was only a few days away, Sushi, who had been hiding in the palace to raise her baby recently, couldn't sit still. She rarely came to Beihi's Zikin Palace except to ask for greetings, and she always hid in her own room. In the palace, especially after she became pregnant, she did not easily see Lily, for she was deeply afraid that the piece of hard-won meat in her belly would be ruthlessly destroyed by Lily. But Lily has been very favored in recent months, and the limelight has been too great. She can't sit still, so she drags concubine Xian and the two concubines over. After entering the Zikin Palace, Sushi glanced at her before she could say anything. Seeing the pictures of beauties scattered on the floor and Fu Feng and others who were kneeling on the ground, Lily, who was supposed to do these things herself, leaned on the soft couch with her eyes half closed, and the palace servants waved fans to her left and right to provide air for her, while someone took a beauty hammer to beat her legs. Her armored fingers were now resting on her thighs over her waist, looking indescribably leisurely and comfortable. Sushi was so anxious about the draft recently that she couldn't sit still and wanted to go out to find out the news. She didn't expect Lily to be so dismissive and leave such an important matter to her servants. His sister being too negligent, concubine Su couldn't help but speak first, her body trembling slightly with anger. These are the sisters who will enter the palace in the future. Now there is no owner in the middle palace, and sister controls the harem. The great power is supposed to share the emperor's worries. How can such an important matter be left to the palace maid? Su is now more than 6 months pregnant, her belly has been slightly protruding, and she has a plum blossom cut on her forehead. Like golden foil, even if he spoke angrily, there was still a look of pity on his brows. I don't know whether it was because of the influence of the original owner or because Lily couldn't stand Sue's appearance of lecturing her. Hearing her words, he couldn't help but sneered, slowly opened his eyes, and interrupted slowly. Her words, okay. In the past, Su family had disagreements with Guo Beihi, but in terms of status, although Guo Beihi was higher than Su family, because Su family was more favored, and because she came from a scholarly family, she had been well read since she was a child. Although the poems and books were not very eloquent, they could quote scriptures and sarcastically every time, making Guo Beihi furious. Even if Guo Beihi tried to trick her behind her back, he had never interrupted her in such a scornful manner. Sushi was stunned for a moment, and when he came back to his senses, his cheeks were red with anger and his body was trembling slightly. This is my business. Since the emperor has left it in my hands, what does this have to do with others? If I want to handle it myself or find someone to do it, many people want power and trouble like Lily but cannot get it. But Lily didn't pay attention to what everyone wanted. Concubine Xian and others' eyes were a little red, but they didn't dare to say anything due to Lily's arrogance. What's more, what if these people have entered the palace? How many of them are qualified to become my sisters? Those who have no status will be inferior to the palace servants around me. I am willing to let Fu Feng and others you do things for them, but you give them a lift. Lily half supported her body and sat up, gently arranging her clothes with her armored fingers, with a sneer on her face. You still want me to do it myself? Regardless of whether they can afford it, I'm afraid their luck will be ruined by then. She had an arrogant and domineering expression, with unspeakable contempt and cold arrogance in her rolling eyes. The corners of her mouth were raised at the moment, and Lily Guo's already outstanding appearance now looked gorgeous for some reason. Concubine Xian and others sourly guessed that it might be because Chu Yuniang favored Lily recently, which made her so arrogant. Although they gritted their teeth with hatred, they did not dare to say more. They only dared to lower their heads. Su, however, was so angry at Lily's behavior that she gritted her teeth, turned pale, pointed at Lily and said, "Sister, what you said is too much." "Concubine, pay attention to your identity." Lily stroked her hair without raising her head. "These lovely people haven't even entered the palace yet, and my sister is already so anxious to stand up for them. It's a pity that she is too impatient. If you have some spare time, you might as well take care of the piece of meat in your belly. Your Majesty is not having many heirs now. I am afraid that you have made a mistake. Not only will it hurt your body, but the Emperor may also lose another dragon. Heir. In Lily's several missions, every mission has to be swallowed up, but this one is the most refreshing. It feels really good to be a villain. Although you are not liked by others, you can do whatever you want without any scruples. You can say whatever you want." As if he had vented all the bad breath that he had accumulated for many times in one breath, and the happy feeling made Lily feel refreshed and comfortable to be this evil person. To be continued. Cannon Fodder Strategy. Author, Juan ERWR. Chapter 371. Sue's breasts couldn't help but rise and fall when she heard Lily's words. She was wearing a Xiangfei-colored palace dress today, and the skin exposed at the neckline was as white and tender as snow. Even though she was so angry at this moment, but it did not affect her beauty. It was a pity that Chu Yunyang was not here at the moment. Lily waved her hand, "But if Sister Sue insists on relieving me of my worries, she will stay. Fu Feng and others are short of manpower. Please be patient with me, Sister Sue. I am very trapped, so I will excuse you now." After saying this, Lily was helped up by several palace people. Without even looking at it, several women with ugly faces went straight into the inner hall to rest after hearing Lily compare the second concubine Ergu to a servant. After that day, the arrogant words of the noble concubine in the palace often spread to the ears of everyone in the harem, but Chu Yunyang turned a deaf ear to them. Before the newcomer entered the palace, Lily could be said to be the most favored one in the entire harem. Until August in the middle of the day, the selected beautiful women were already waiting outside the palace gate a day in advance. After dawn, they were led by the eunuchs into the imperial garden from the north gate. Then they were divided into several groups for Chu Yunyang to visit. Since there was no Empress Dowager in the harem and no owner in the middle palace, Lily had received this mission earlier. The day before, Concubine Su and Concubine Xian, both of whom she had always been at odds with, came over and begged her to go with them. It was a good show, so Lily naturally agreed. Many people in the palace did not sleep soundly that night. Many people in the palace had already endured a long day, and now a batch of fresh and delicious beauties would be introduced, which would naturally make many elderly people in the palace feel uneasy. But Lily slept soundly. When Chu Yunyang reached out to touch her hair, she turned away impatiently, which made Chu Yunyang laugh gloomily. After dawn, everyone dressed up and headed to the imperial garden. At this time, the garden was already full of people standing neatly. Chu Yunyang got off the dragon chariot in front. Groups of internal servants and beauties who had just entered the palace knelt down one after another, and Lily also got off the chariot. Among the group of pink figures kneeling on the ground, there was only one plump and tall girl. Kneeling, she twisted the hem of her skirt and looked over curiously. But because she was a little far away, she seemed to be unable to see the scene clearly, and then she stuck out her tongue. After being pulled by the person next to him, he reluctantly knelt down. You don't need to look at it to know that this is Yang Yuru who defeated Guo Beihe later in the plot. At this moment, the enemy was extremely jealous when they met. Beihe waved her hand without thinking, and said to Fu Feng beside her, "Whose family is that from, girl? If you don't understand the rules, if you see the emperor delaying in kneeling, and dare to stick out your tongue, you are so immodest, I will give you 5 slaps." Later, Concubine De and Concubine Xian happened to come together in a hurry and heard Lily's words clearly. Su touched her belly and let her personal maid help her off the chariot, and saw that Chu Yunyang was still there. When the emperor encountered such a situation, before the emperor could say anything, Lily rushed to hurt someone, feeling very dissatisfied. Although she did not like these beautiful girls, after all, Su was already quite old now, but compared to a group of she didn't know if she would be favored in the future, but the girl she disliked the most was naturally Lily, who had been with her for a long time and was now very favored. Comparing the two, Su said without hesitation. Sister, what you said is wrong. This person may be our sister in the future. In addition, it makes sense that she is young and doesn't understand the rules. Sister is also an old man in the palace. After entering the palace, we will become sisters. Just teach her slowly. Why bother to hit someone when you first enter the palace, especially in the face? You must know that the face of a girl's family is the most important. If it is damaged, what will my sister do to compensate? Mrs. looked at me with pity, but her sharp mouth showed her ability. She not only pointed out that Lily was not too young, implying that she was a faggot in the past and had to make way for young girls in the future, but also ridiculed her for being mean and disrespectful, and even pointed out that she acted too much. Guo Bei was so domineering that she gave Lily eye drops in front of Chu Yunyang. With this mouth, in the past, Guo Bei was only willful and no match for her, but Lily did not compete with her for her clever words. Instead, she sneered. As the saying goes, beating means kissing and scolding means love. I want to get close to her right now. This is her blessing. Otherwise, if you look at so many beautiful girls, if I don't reward her with this blessing, how can the emperor see her? Your Majesty, please tell me, is this the truth behind what I say as a concubine? Lily curled up her lips and smiled. She didn't have as many worries as Lily Guo. Lily Guo's wish to live or die made Lily feel less constrained. She didn't speak or act like Lily Guo, who seemed arrogant but was actually full of worries. Those who act neither up to nor down, bear the name of being domineering, but in fact it is only on the surface. At this moment, Lily showed the arrogant demeanor of the original owner, and even though he was clearly hitting someone, he still wanted to say that it was for someone. His face did not give Sushi any face at all. Sushi was so angry that she gritted her teeth and stared at Lily speechless. Fu Feng and Fu Lu followed Lily's wishes and brought two strong nuns to catch Yang Yuru from the crowd. They slapped Yang Yuru 5 times across the face, and the innocence in Yang Yuru's body was immediately shattered. Most of the time, her mouth was bleeding, and her originally combed hair was a little messy. Although she struggled hard, she was still dragged in front of Lily in a very embarrassed manner. In the plot, Yang Yuru did not intend to attract Chu Yunyang's attention. She had no interest in serving the king at first, but it was precisely because of her unique and arrogant appearance that she successfully attracted Chu Yunyang's attention. His eyes made him subconsciously notice this beauty who was mixed in a group of prostitutes, but finally stood out. Although Yang Yuru is beautiful, she is not a rare beauty. She has a contradictory but wonderful combination of stubbornness, weakness, and innocence. After slowly getting along with her, Chu Yunyang likes her. Fall in love with her inner beauty instead of just admiring her outer beauty. The first time she met Chu Yunyang was when Chu Yunyang was wearing ordinary clothes. Yang Yuru did not let him out. She only thought that he was a chamberlain of some palace. After talking with him, she showed her naughty expression. Her nature, coupled with the way she was neither humble nor arrogant when she entered the palace on the first day, and dared to speak out, and did not give in because of power, made Chu Yunyang remember her in his heart. Guo Bei was often jealous of this and couldn't help scolding her, and finally became crazy with jealousy. However, Bei was sneering in her heart at this moment. A casual eunuch in the harem dared to lead an attendant around, even if he was as domineering as her palace. No waiter dared to do this, not to mention that the clothes worn by the emperor had their own particularities. Even regular clothes were embroidered with the sun, moon, and stars according to their own rules. Which eunuch would dare to wear such regular clothes? Yang Yuru also comes from a family of officials, and has read poetry and books since she was a child. She dared to pretend not to recognize Chu Yunyang in the plot. Either she was born stupid, and her parents copied her 4 books and 5 classics. What should men do? She was taught everything she learned, but not the etiquette and rules at all, or she was just pretending to be crazy and acting like a fool, that's all on purpose. Who among the people who have entered this harem dares to be innocent and simple, without even the slightest desire? If you really don't want to compete for favor, you won't enter the palace in the first place. Now that you are here, why bother pretending to be a chaste and fierce woman, saying that you don't want to compete with the world for a husband, and you only want to be single? It was as if everyone else except her was as vulgar as others. Lily sneered at the target of her mission, covered her mouth with a beauty fan, and smiled softly. I will reward you with the opportunity to give you 5 slaps in exchange for greeting the emperor from a close distance. You must thank me for your great kindness. Today, her lower body is wearing a bright purple gauze skirt, which flutters gently in the wind. Her upper body is in a goose yellow tube top, covered with lavender tulle. Except for the shoulders, which are covered by a shawl, her snow-white arms are loomingly wrapped in it. Under the narrow sleeves, she is even more sultry than if she wasn't exposed at all. The color makes her skin sparkle like snow, and her delicate collarbones and round shoulders on both sides are exposed on her chest. After she has changed inside, she seems to be a bit uncomfortable in the past. The patient Guo Bei's whole person seemed to have undergone earth-shaking changes. Chu Yunyang just looked at her willful behavior with a smile, without interrupting, nor did he cast his eyes on Yang Yuru, who was standing about 3 meters away in front of him, with a swollen face. Although he liked beauties, but he didn't like them looking so embarrassed, especially when there was a ready-made lily in front of him that attracted his attention. He didn't even turn his head to Yang Yuru, and just allowed her to be embarrassed. He stood and did not interrupt Lily's words. Sister, it's such a great kindness. I slapped someone and asked someone to thank me. My sister has learned this trick, so pursed her lips, glanced at Chu Yunyang subconsciously, and smiled softly. Why, Your Majesty, look. Well done to the noble concubine for the crime of immorality. The beauty in Chu Yunyang, who came over automatically, accepted it naturally and did not refuse. He took Sushi's delicate body into his arms, but when he saw that Sushi had already stretched out when she got up, her smile became a little lighter. My beloved concubine is pregnant with Lyogia, so it's not appropriate to worry too much. Sue's face turned pale. Chu Yunyang's 2 words clearly hit her harder than Lily's cynicism just now. What does the emperor mean? Is my sister a good fighter? Not bad. Chu Yunyang nodded. Before Su could speak, Yang Yuru, who was being restrained, got the strength from nowhere and pushed away the 2 palace servants who were restraining her. She shouted, Your Majesty, this slave is not convinced. Just now she had the strength to push away the 2 strong palace men, but now when she ran towards Chu Yunyang, her steps staggered, and in the end it was as if all her strength had been exhausted, and she was limp. He knelt down in front of Chu Yunyang, raised his face and stared at Chu Yunyang. Your Majesty, this slave is not convinced. Your father has taught you to behave uprightly since you were a child. If you make any mistakes, you will be punished. But your concubine will admit it. The empress asked the slave to be beaten, but the slave refused to accept it. Father said that if the emperor is wise, he will be able to distinguish right from wrong and distinguish between right and wrong. To be continued. P.S. Third update. Thanks, Pao Mo, dear He Shivi who gave the reward. He Shivi will have the 4th update at 8 o'clock. The 4th update is so cute and asking for fans' votes. Imperial concubine Liang Liang, bring the pink tickets, or grab them if you don't want them. Everyone, spare your life. Spare your life. Here comes the little fan ticket.